we are witnessing a historic day, which is Vice President Kamala Harris earning enough delegate votes from Democrats to win the party's nomination for president. She will become the first black woman and the first woman of South Asian descent to lead a major party ticket.
And later this month, we will gather in Chicago, united as one party, where we're going to have an opportunity to celebrate this historic moment together. And again, this campaign is about all of us coming together, people coming together from every walk of life, every lived experience, and being fueled by our love of country, knowing that we are prepared to fight for the best of who we are. We believe in the promise of America, a promise of freedom, opportunity, and justice, not just for some, but for all.
And up next, she'll have to make one of the most consequential decisions of her campaign yet, which is choosing a running mate.
A source tells CNN that Harris will meet with her top VP finalists over the weekend. She is set to announce her pick by Tuesday, and that's when she's hitting the road for a major battleground state blitz. Joining us now to discuss, CNN Chief National Affairs Correspondent Jeff Zeleny and CNN National Correspondent Kristen Holmes. Jeff, first to you. Obviously a big historic moment, but now some challenges ahead, which she alluded to in that call. The first thing is picking a VP. What are you hearing about that process?
Look, that's going to be her first presidential level decision, really her own choice, that she can put her imprint on a campaign that she's largely inherited, and she's grateful to have inherited a campaign kind of at the ready. But this is her choice. So look, I'm told that she is closing in on these decisions. She has all the vetting materials in front of her. And even though those are the list of contenders, they're all not equal necessarily. There are some leaders in there. And all Democrats, all people we speak to, point to Josh Shapiro. He's the Pennsylvania governor. Of course, Pennsylvania is such a pivotal swing state. We've seen him out campaigning every single day this week, I think, for her. So he is among the finalists who are said to be having private conversations with her over the weekend. Again, only she knows who she's comfortable with. She's looking for a governing partner, but she's also looking for someone to help her win. So in addition to Shapiro, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has drawn the attention of a lot of Democrats this week. I think a week ago, not many knew him, but he's been very popular in the Midwest. He is also on the list. But look, this is something that she and her husband, Doug Emhoff, are going to have meetings with some or most of these candidates face-to-face, perhaps a couple virtually, and they'll make a decision.
Also, she's starting her swing state blitz in Philadelphia, is that right? In Pennsylvania, isn't it bad?
But she's ending it in Arizona, so perhaps with Mark Kelly, you can argue it either way.
That's a good point.
And miles away from Minnesota when she's in western Wisconsin. So they've added a few geographical things there to keep us guessing.
Poking holes in my theory here, Jeff. Okay, let's talk about now the Trump campaign, because he had these racist attacks on Harris. He's doubling down on them. Is there any strategy to this?
Well, if there is, I know a lot of Republicans who would like to know what it is. I cannot tell you the number of Republicans I have spoken to, even allies of Donald Trump's, who have no idea what it is that he is doing going down this line. Even earlier in that day, the day of the NABJ conference when Trump made those remarks, the campaign was briefing surrogates and telling them essentially, stick with her record, say that she is weak, say that she is ineffective, talk about policy. I was told by senior advisors, that's what we're going to focus on. Make this about Biden's policies being her policies. Obviously, that went completely sideways when he sat down in that chair at that panel. And now, not only has he doubled down on it, but no one is backtracking from those comments. And when I talk to people close to him, they say, we don't think he will. This is not a man who likes to admit that he is wrong. So now we have moved on to a space where this is part of the campaign. And what that actually looks like and how ugly that gets moving forward obviously remains to be seen, but it's not as though you can put that toothpaste back in the tube.
Speaking of VP picks, Trump and Vance are set to campaign in Georgia tomorrow, I believe. What do you anticipate the message is going to be?
Well, Georgia is a really interesting place, particularly given the shakeup at the top of the Democratic ticket, because it was a place that Republicans really wrote off in a positive way. They thought, we're going to win this state in November. They felt really good about it. They were putting out some ads, but they felt like it was an anomaly that they lost in 2020, that they were soaring to a win in November. Now, obviously, all of that has changed. It also changes because there was an effort among Republicans to reach out to black voters, to minority voters. Remember, he's doing a rally in Atlanta, Georgia. That effort obviously stifled by the fact that he got up there on that stage and made these comments about Kamala Harris, these racial comments. And so what they tried to do to bridge that gap between the inroads that they had made with minority voters, particularly black men, and Donald Trump's own comments that came out of his mouth, that will be likely what we expect to see on Saturday.
I mean, the thing is, Kamala Harris still has a tough road ahead,
No doubt.
right? And yet there's clearly something that is bothering Trump about what he's watching, which is that she is energizing a lot of people. And we're seeing that in the fundraising haul. It is really stunning the kind of money that she's brought in, Jeff.
It absolutely is. I mean, the Harris campaign now is $310 million in the last month. And that is starting with, there were some bleak days for Biden fundraising, and it effectively dried up. So this just sort of came organically. But there is no doubt this is still a very challenging race for Democrats. I mean, it is, it's the incumbent who has to defend their record. So she can escape that a bit. But even she said in that message today, this is a hard fight. It's why she amplified her team, added a lot of veterans of the Obama campaign and some other campaigns to her team. So this has moved very quickly in just a week, but 90 days to go, and early voting much, much, much sooner than that.
Yeah, she talked about it on the call. It starts in September. She shouted out North Carolina when it's set to go down. Jeff, Kristen, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it. Yeah. We want to get some perspective on the history being made today, so let's discuss with CNN contributor and associate professor of history at Johns Hopkins University, Leah Wright Rigeur. Leah, thank you so much for being with us. How did you feel seeing the first black woman and the first woman of South Asian descent to win enough delegates to lead a major party ticket?
I think we are watching history unfold, and there are no two ways around it. In the same way that when we saw all of these kind of motions with Barack Obama back in 2008, I think we are having another moment, but we're also having a moment that many people expected to have in 2016 with Hillary Clinton. Put those two things together, I think you have just an enormous amount of historical importance, but also a sense of real significance that moves beyond the symbolic. This is something that has teeth. This is something that has meat. This is something that has weight. And it's certainly something that over half the country has waited for a very long time. To be honest, I never thought that I would see a Black or Indian woman as president of the United States, and now it's well within the realm of possibility.
She doesn't have much time. So I wonder what you think about that as a challenge, but what the advantage of that may also be.
Well, I think the first thing is that a lot of people are comparing this to Hubert Humphrey in 1968, where Hubert Humphrey becomes the vice presidential nominee and essentially is anointed without the input of the Democratic Party. And it goes on to be a lot of problematics. But I actually don't think that this is that moment. This is a moment where it appears that Kamala Harris, despite the short amount of time that she is remaining to the actual election, has seemed to build an enormous amount of potential and momentum that is turning in and has the possibility of becoming a very real political movement. There is energy, there is excitement, and there is movement around it. And I would point to vote.org, which has seen over, I think, 200,000 newly registered voters who are all saying that they're inspired by the recent announcement around Kamala Harris. So there's an enormous amount of unity on the left and within the Democratic Party, but also amongst key constituents, including young people and young voters around the candidacy of Kamala Harris.
Leah, you mentioned the historic nature of the 2016 election and Hillary Clinton being the nominee for the Democratic Party. I'm wondering if you think there are any lessons to be learned following what we saw unfold during that election.
Well, I think one of the big lessons that actually the Biden campaign learned in 2020 is that the idea of this kind of vast electorate supporting the Democratic Party that is made up of essentially of a rainbow coalition that includes white voters, that is actually not the pathway, not the necessary pathway to victory in this election. It's something in 2016, I think, that was overstated, and that in 2020, they adjusted. Instead, the pathway to victory is the Obama pathway. What he did in 2008, what he was able to do again in 2012, bringing together all those demographics. And the other thing is there has to be movement energy behind victories, behind political victories. We saw this with Trump in 2016 and the kind of MAGA movement energy that was around that grew out of the Tea Party movement. But I think, again, we saw it in 2020 with the Movement for Black Lives, which really organized around Joe Biden and propelled him into the White House. Kamala Harris is going to need that kind of energy in order to win the election.
I got to be honest, as a former CNBC person, a former Bloomberg person, I want to nerd out about the AI stuff and the NASDAQ correction right now. But
that sound you just heard was people putting us on mute.
Exactly. I'm going to bring them back with this. You've got new reporting on the vice president and the economy. And it's been one of the big questions, not just will she change course from where the Biden team has been, but also who's around her, who's making decisions in this moment.
Well, first, I just got off the phone when I was coming to set with some people inside the White House about how they're thinking about this jobs report. And they're saying you can't draw a trend from one report. They point back to April and said we had 108,000 jobs created in April. No one was calling the recession alarm back then. And they said it's too early to say exactly what it means for the fall. And of course, they will not touch anything about the Federal Reserve with a 10-foot pole because of the independence of the central bank. That being said, it does raise a lot of questions about where Vice President Harris stands and how this is going to inform her economic agenda. I spoke to friends of hers, longtime colleagues of hers, about exactly where her North Star in the economy is. And they said she's pro-business, she's centrist, she's pragmatic. That was a word that came up in many conversations, but that she really cares about working families, small business, and underserved communities. That she's going to use the Biden budget, the blueprint that was put out earlier this year, sort of a starting point, and pull a handful of policies from there to build her economic agenda. But she's just in the early stages. She's just beginning to staff up on the policy side. We really haven't seen that much yet. And so there's a tendency on one hand to say, here are all the things that I can do for you if I'm elected. But on the other hand, if you are running on continuing the administration, in the words of one person who's advising her, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just stay the course and don't say anything or overpromise and potentially underdeliver, or do anything that's seen as too novel, too new, too different.
David, to that point, we've all heard from Biden administration officials for 3.5 years that people like the things that we've done. They just don't necessarily understand them. When you pull them in isolation, they like them a lot. This has not been a winning issue for the former Biden campaign or this White House up to this point. Can Harris really do that? Stay the course. This is what we've done. People just need to understand.
Yeah, and it's not currently a winning issue for Kamala Harris in the early polling either on the issue of the economy. This is still a Trump advantage category, and it is still the top issue for voters. So this clearly will be a dominant focus. You all remember Build Back Better? I don't know if you remember that, but that was...
Rest in peace.
But all those programs that actually didn't make it through Congress in that deal, Kamala Harris was behind a lot of them inside the administration. And I think if you want to look to some of the policy pieces that you're going to hear from her on the campaign trail, look to what didn't get done when Joe Manchin sort of scuttled that and during the Biden years, and that all got left on the cutting room floor. She's going to try to pick some of those pieces back up and put that into her overall economic proposal.
That's a really interesting point, because the proposals that were scrapped, things like universal pre-K, I think more expansive paid family leave, obviously the child tax credit wasn't made permanent over time. Ashley, on that point, on the policy side of things, it has been such a good few weeks for Democrats. Yes. I think even Republicans would grudgingly acknowledge that fact. Is that the important thing here? Does she need to be rolling out agenda items? Does she need to be talking about policy, or do you just ride this wave on some level?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think you ride the wave as long as the energy is there. Don't turn off the faucet. And it might start to dissipate, in a week or two, just because that's how human nature works. But I think that there's an opportunity here for the vice president to introduce her platform, who she is going to be as the president of the United States. Yes, she is Joe Biden's vice president, but she does not dictate. She's not the decider at the end of the day. She is his support. She is his number two. So talk to the American public, talk to them about the future, the vision, what it looks like to try and build an economy with AI being taking away the jobs in my hometown, where when we go through the turnpike, it's all computers now. What happened to a good turnpike job in Youngstown, Ohio? Talk to them about how she's going to protect the labor unions and make sure that if you go on strike, you have collective bargaining. Talk to women, which is such an important constituency in this election, about how we want you to be able to stay in the workplace, but also get paid family leave. So there is an opportunity. Today is not a great jobs report, but I think you can use this as an opportunity to say, and this is why I'm going to have this agenda to move America forward.
The vice president will meet over the weekend with the top finalists to join that Democratic ticket. Likely explains why they all canceled their weekend plans. I did as well, to try and throw my name into the running, see what would happen, not in a political sense. It just feels like it would be an interesting thing to do this weekend.
I've learned from the past 4 weeks not to make weekend plans.
Yes, also, yes, we haven't had a weekend.
I feel like a
in
loser because I didn't have any weekend plans.
I don't know that any of them did. Just say you're canceling
I'm
anyway,
canceling
and all of a sudden
everything.
you're in the game.
You're in the game.
But what's your sense of what Harris is looking for in these interviews?
Well, there are a few criteria that she's looking for. I mean, of course, there's been an exhaustive vetting process. They're looking for a good complement to her, someone who could not only be a good governing partner, but also a person who can bring attributes that maybe she as a politician doesn't necessarily have. They're also looking for someone who is squeaky clean. A close friend of hers told me no one wants a John Edwards-like situation that could have been avoided if you just read that last piece of paper. But they're also looking for someone who can control the map, as you're just mentioning. I mean, Pennsylvania, in the words of one person close to the campaign, is a tipping point. And so it's a critical state, but so is Arizona. And while Kentucky might not necessarily be a critical state, they say, well, perhaps he could, bring some of that muster to Georgia, say, with the knowledge of the American South. So they all bring certain attributes, but I think it's that. I think it's the governance, it's the record, do they have any skeletons, and it's the map.
Can I ask you, we're going to dig into all this stuff at length over the course of the next couple of hours, but the vice president announced staff hires today, expanded the team, kept most of the team in place, kept the top leadership of the Biden campaign in place, but brought on David Plouffe, brought on Mitch Stewart, brought on Stephanie Cutter, expanded David Binder's role. It's like the Obama campaigns all over again on some level. What do you see as the impetus of this?
It's game time. She's now at the top of the ticket. This is not the Biden campaign anymore. This is the Harris campaign. And so I think she has done this well because she has kept folks on who have been on the team before. Julie Rodriguez, who was a former colleague of mine and is an excellent campaign manager, as well as veterans like a J.O.D., a Jen O'Malley Dillon, Stephanie Cutter. The gang is back together, I will say, and it's exciting to see. But I will also say that there is just this new invigoration of people who also want to work on the campaign. I get texts all day long about submitting their resume to someone, and I'm like, I only have so much pull, folks. Like you go to KamalaHarris.com and you submit your resume the same way most everyone else does. I also think, though, that it's because of the short runway of her campaign. You can't learn on the job right now. Yeah. You have to know what you're doing. You have to know the different pieces. But also, in 2020, I didn't join the Biden campaign until June of 2020. So this is a natural course of a campaign. In the summer, you ramp up. I hired probably 500 people in my department in July of the campaign. Here we are. It's business as usual. Bringing these senior heavy hitters on makes sense, and as long as they can all work together, and they pretty much know each other pretty well and can.
Yeah. A historic moment for Kamala Harris, who will become the first black woman and first Asian American to lead a major party presidential ticket after securing enough Democratic convention delegates just a few hours ago. CNN's Van Jones joins me now. Van, always appreciate your perspective. I want to get your reaction. These news cycles move so fast, and I feel like we're very firmly on to the next thing as soon as the last thing finished. Your reaction to the moment, kind of the history here.
I've known Kamala Harris for 25 years, and, I'd never thought I would get choked up about anything in her career because I voted for her for district attorney. I voted for her for attorney general. I voted for her for senator. I voted for her for vice president. I'll be voting for her for president. I've been voting for Kamala Harris for so long that you sometimes forget how extraordinary she is. And when I saw they were selling merchandise saying history made, and the merchandise history made sold out almost immediately, I said, this is a big deal. This is a very big deal. I think about my mother. I think about my grandmothers. When it used to be a joke, the idea that you'd ever have a black president at all. Comedians didn't even make jokes about having a black female president because that was completely inconceivable. Even in the land of high comedy, you couldn't imagine it. And yet we're on the edge of it right now. And take a breath. Take a breath. This is a big deal. This is 400 years. This is a very, very big deal today. And we shouldn't rush past it.
And it'll certainly be a moment at the convention as well, which I think will get proper and ample recognition for what it is. I'm also interested, Van, the Vice President has a major decision on her plate right now. And we were just talking last block about some of the attacks that we've seen on Josh Shapiro, the Pennsylvania governor, kind of positioning as people are trying to figure out who's best fit to be in that spot with the Vice President. I'm interested, what's your sense on Josh Shapiro? What's your sense on kind of the short list that exists?
Look, he's come under heavy fire today, but he's coming under heavy fire today because he is the most logical person to get this ticket across the finish line. Pennsylvania is must win. He's amazingly popular in Pennsylvania, and he's a beloved figure in Pennsylvania, and he could make a tremendous difference. He pulls Republican and Democratic votes every time he raises his hand for public office. And so he's coming under fire, but it will take some courage on her part to have, let's just be honest here, a black and Jewish ticket. A black and Jewish ticket with a woman leading the charge. That if elections are about change versus more of the same, this is real change. This would be a courageous pick to say we're not afraid of bigotry. We're not afraid of anti-Jewish bias. We're not afraid of anti-black bias. We're not afraid of anti-women bias. We're going to pick strong leaders, no matter what they look like, no matter how they pray, and that's going to be our ticket. And trust the American people to look at what we're putting forward. Let's not forget, on the other side, they've got some courage on their side as well, but it's more reckless courage. They're putting somebody up with a bunch of felony convictions and somebody who's been in public office for 18 months. So there's some courage on their side, but that looks a little bit reckless. To put two very successful political leaders who have won election after election and who have served honorably and well on a ticket should be what Americans do, no matter how they vote, no matter how they pray, no matter what gender they are. And if she does that, it will be a historic choice all over again.
Turning to the former president, who you mentioned, you said after the NABJ convention, the former president's interview was very clarifying for voters. I'm interested in what you thought of the vice president's response and how her team has operated, which is to say, it's divisive, it's bad, and then just kind of move on. It's been very clear, very concise. Not kind of pulling their hair out, not going on full attack on it. Is that going to be effective?
Well, yeah, because everybody already knows that Donald Trump is obnoxious on issues of race and does stupid, crazy stuff on issues of race. He's been doing it now for 8 years. And if you get off your own message every time he does that, you just reward his shenanigans. And I think it's high time that we say, listen, obviously you have to be a lunatic to not understand that somebody can be black and Asian or part Japanese and part Puerto Rican. That's America is built off of that. That's what America is. But the reason he did it was he was trying to stop her momentum. He saw a rising sun of hope and joy and excitement, and a lot of it fueled by the black community. And so rather than him being able to celebrate that, he decided he's going to dampen that. He's going to try to dampen it by saying, well, she's not even really black. It didn't work. She's still rising. He's still falling. And today is a great day. And we shouldn't even think about the kind of nonsense stuff that Donald Trump says when you have a beautiful thing happening like happening right now in the Democratic Party with Kamala Harris.
Van Jones, always appreciate your perspective, my friend. Thanks so much.
Kamala Harris is about to make the biggest decision yet in her new presidential campaign, as she's also making history, sealing the votes needed to become the first woman of color to lead a major party's ticket.
I'm happy to know that we have enough delegates to secure the nomination. And later this month, we will gather in Chicago, united as one party, where we're going to have an opportunity to celebrate this historic moment together.
CNN's political team is covering all the new developments in the race for the White House. Let's first get to Jeff Zeleny. Jeff, the next 72 hours are going to be crucial for her campaign as she sifts out a VP pick.
They certainly will. I mean, we are told that she has not yet made a decision. We believe she has some finalists. I mean, but the question is who those are. But she's going to have face-to-face meetings, we're told, over the weekend at the Naval Observatory. She had nothing on her public schedule today or tomorrow or Sunday. But she is in crunch time making a decision, I'm told, looking for a governing partner, also trying to find someone she's comfortable with. What's so striking about this is that 4 years ago, next week. She accepted that phone call from Joe Biden to be his running mate. Now she is going to be making that offer to someone else, something that she hasn't necessarily been planning on. So she doesn't have a long relationship with a lot of these candidates. But Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro is seen by many Democrats as a leading contender. Why? He's a good campaigner. There's no doubt about it. He's been out every single day kind of showing this, but also Pennsylvania, a must-win state. However, is she going to go geography or biography? There's no question that the astronaut sort of background of Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, also so impressive and important. Also, the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, has been a fiery campaigner. He's the one who branded the Trump campaign as weird, and a lot of Democrats are taking notice of that, and then a few other potential contenders as well. But we do believe that this weekend is when she will decide who she's most comfortable with, and she and her husband, Doug Emhoff, will have a meeting, perhaps stretching some period of time, private, of course, and then she'll roll this person out at a rally on Tuesday in Philadelphia. I'm told do not read anything into the Philadelphia,
Yeah.
even though Josh Shapiro is the governor of Pennsylvania, because other candidates also, she's also going to Arizona by the end of the week, so we're not sure about that. But all eyes are on Governor Shapiro.
Yeah, as you said, not a position she expected herself to be in.
Right.
Not a position really any of us expected her to be in a couple months back.
Even 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
President Biden was still a candidate.
Yeah. Kristen Holmes, over to you. Focusing on the Trump campaign now, they are expected to hit the campaign trail tomorrow. He and Vice Presidential nominee J.D. Vance, they've already been outspoken criticizing some of these potential Democratic nominees.
Yeah, particularly focusing on Governor Shapiro. Clearly, they believe that he is a very high contender on this list. Now, one thing to remember about Donald Trump is that even before he chose J.D. Vance, one of the things that he has said routinely is that he doesn't think vice presidents matter, that candidate does not matter. It's always about the top of the ticket. But that doesn't mean they're not paying very close attention and that his team is already preparing opposition research. So here's what we heard from Trump today.
Vice President Kamala Harris is now deciding on her running mate. So it looks like the finalists are Josh Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania. Does he help her get more votes in Pennsylvania? What about Mark Kelly? Does he help her with the border, Arizona?
Can I tell you, I don't care. Let them do whatever. They still want to have open borders. If she picks Shapiro, she's going to lose the Palestinian vote, and that's fine. Everybody has their liabilities. I think if she picks Shapiro, who happens to be Jewish, she loses her little Palestinian base.
It's obviously unclear what he means by little Palestinian base. I think what he is probably referring to is some of the backlash that we have seen over the Biden-Harris policies when it comes to Israel. But again, that's not a little Palestinian base. However, they do seem to have focused on Josh Shapiro for some reason. It's not just this. We've also heard other campaign members talking about it, senior advisors talking about Josh Shapiro, hitting him on various things. So obviously we'll see. I mean, maybe it's because it's a little bit threatening. The fact that he's widely popular and it's a critical state.
J.D. Vance described him as like a poor man's Obama. We'll get to those comments in just a moment. But Jeff, to you, speaking of former President Obama, the Harris campaign added some Obama veterans, not only veterans of his administration, but his campaign as well.
They did, and David Plouffe is the name that certainly stood out. And this has been really in the works and in discussions for a couple of weeks. He, of course, was the architect of the Obama campaign back in 2008. He devised the strategy and got Senator Obama elected the first time and worked on his reelection as well. Several other names as well. Stephanie Cutter is going to be coming on board as a senior advisor in charge of messaging. Mitch Stewart, he is in charge of the battleground campaign. It matters because this is something, and David Binder is going to be the pollster. It matters because they know the path to victory. I mean, you would naturally choose someone from a winning campaign, but this is still being run by the Harris team. The same campaign manager and campaign chair are staying in place, but these advisors now are just coming to sort of supplement them. And one told me today it's an all hands on deck moment. That's why they're coming on board.
John, as Jeff said, you want to have hands that have won before on board, but should we read something into these hires when it comes to strategy?
I think the Harris campaign would tell you that, we're 90-something days out from the election. This is a time to staff up. This is, to Jeff Storch's point, an all-hands-on-deck situation where they've completely upended their campaign. At the same time, there's sort of a delicate dance where you can't overhaul a campaign in 3.5 months, but as the candidate, you want to put your stamp on it. And we've seen Harris do that in terms of, completely changing the message. It's not about democracy, it's about freedom. She's prosecuting the case against Trump. We've seen her just sort of try to put her unique spin on this, but at the same time, manage the campaign that she inherited.
And I would say just one thing to add to that, I think you might see some changes at the Trump campaign as well. I mean, this is a critical time in which there are just a few months left. And we've heard from a lot of allies who believe that this is a different race now. Now, if you talk to the campaign, they say it's the exact same race. We were going to run the exact same way we did against Joe Biden. If you talk to some of the people on the outside, they say, let's look back to 2016. This is roughly the same time that Kellyanne Conway got brought into the Trump campaign. There are changes that are naturally made anyway. Obviously, this is extenuating circumstances because Harris just became the nominee and she also just became a candidate right before that. But I think you're looking at likelihood of getting more staffing for the Trump campaign, changing strategy in some ways. I mean, this is normally a time in which you'd see this kind of beefing up and moving forward.
Yeah, and perhaps, as you noted with the Shapiro reporting, perhaps a sign that they're taking this way more seriously than they would have going up against Joe Biden. Kristen, Orit, Jeff, pleasure to have you on. Thanks so much. Let's chat with our panel now. Some political experts are joining us. Bill de Blasio is with us. Bill, Harris obviously has won enough delegates to be the party's nominee. Her campaign is touting this massive fundraising haul in July, $310 million. That doubles Trump's campaign. How does that translate from momentum into meaningful change in the race?
Well, Boris, I don't think we've seen this kind of speed and intensity of a change in a race in our lifetime. I mean, we literally went from a situation where, unfortunately, President Biden was losing across the board to now Kamala Harris basically tying up this ballgame and, able to win it. So that extraordinary momentum and energy in such a few days, it's really been very few days, is quite striking. What she has to do now, I think, is really deepen the message. That the money is a delivery mechanism, but the message is what actually moves people. And if you watch her Atlanta rally, I thought it was really strong. I agree that she is finding themes that the party really needed. The question of democracy is on everyone's mind, but I don't think it was the winning hand. I think the freedom frame is much sharper, much more gets to the heart of what people are going through, particularly women, protecting the right of women to make decisions about their own bodies. So I hope with the new Obama team coming in, who are exceptional at message, that we're going to see a more disciplined, message-focused campaign that all that money now can be a delivery mechanism for.
Maria Cardona, how do you see Harris now beefing up her team with these high-profile Obama alumni?
I think it's wonderful. And, you asked just a little bit ago, what is the strategy here with bringing on this team? Well, the strategy is to win. Everyone who has been brought on has been part of winning campaigns, whether that's twice with Obama, when Joe Biden was elected. And so they understand what it takes to win. They are also consummate team players because it is really important. She's not going to push aside the team that she currently has around her because they also have been very successful. This lightning in a bottle that has occurred since she became the candidate and now the nominee. And it's a historic day today, Boris, as you know, you have noted it. And I have had the pleasure of being a delegate to cast my ballot for the first woman of color that is going to be the nominee of a major party and hopefully the first woman president of the United States. And so I think that the strategy is to bring this disparate group of strategists and operatives together. They all know how to win. They all know what needs to happen in the next 90-something days. It's a sprint, but I think it's a sprint in part of the race that this group knows how to win.